Hello and welcome to Can You Hear Me at the Back, the podcast about all things voice and communication. Hi, Aundrea.
Hey,
Leon. Surprised you there.
I was paying attention. I was.
Sure. So in a surprised sound and movement, how are you feeling today? Oh, stress and tiredness.
It's like combined in one.
Combined in one.
It's a nice little ball, a yawn of tiredness and stress.
A ball of tiredness and stress.
Yeah. It seemed appropriate. Leon!
Enjoy the podcast, guys. Welcome to Joy and Stress and Small Packages. Rude.
Leon?
Yeah.
In a sound and a movement, how do you feel? I feel like this has to do with food.
Yeah, I had quite a lot of kimchi just now. I need to ask you this. So somebody pointed out that I often say kimchi rather than kimchi. So you have lived in the Korea, and can you tell me whether it is iambic or trochaic? Thanks.
I would say kimchi. Because in Korean every syllable gets stressed. Yeah. You also only get, I think it's either three, you get syllables in terms of threes or wait, sorry. It's either twos or ones. That's why if you get something like it's threes. So if you get something like AC, it becomes ACIA, right? Because you need the third.
Oh, so there's a little schwa at the end.
Yeah. That's why you get some computer becomes computer sometimes. There's a whole bunch of them. Yeah. That's why oftentimes you get the no stop also happens a lot in it's not something that I just do, but you know.
So it should be spondaic. We're thinking about it in terms of stress patterns. It should be kimchi.
Kimchi. Yeah.
Da. Not pyrrhic. Kimchi.
Yeah.
It's kimchi.
Kimchi, yeah.
Also really important.
Also very delicious. Nina?
And what's not to like about things that are delicious? Sure.
Nothing.
So today, what are we talking about? You look jubilant about our conversation.
We are talking about, should actors do accents? The heart shape.
For those people who are in the UK and watching this on YouTube, you'll be like, why is she doing the Mobot?
The heart shape.
Because the long distance runner Mo Farah, I think it's now like Sir Mo Farah or something. He did this quite a lot because he was like Mo Farah, like an M.
In Korea, it was a heart shape. It was the I love you, and then it turned into this, which is just like a heart.
Oh.
Yeah.
Guys, check out the podcast for that, or Instagram. I will take a screenshot of Aundrea doing her fingers like a heart, which is nothing like a heart. I was thinking about this the other day, watching Grey's Anatomy as I want to do, and that is not the shape of a heart, like a human heart.
No, there's actually a reason for that, and I don't know what it is.
Because it's a lady bending over and a bottom. True story.
My mind has been blown.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Oh
so misogynistic.
Oh my gosh. I've been using that as like a symbol of cuteness and love.
Yeah, and you're like that. It's bum.
Oh.
It's a true story. I will post a link about that on on Twitter.
Think so.
It's like, you know that movie with James Spader? No, James
Spade.
James Spade? Secretary? With Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Mm-hmm.
when the cover of it, like the main image of it, is like her bottom and her legs, and it makes that heart shape.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, oh my gosh. I really have
Not
to sit and
cute.
like reevaluate
Not
my entire
cute.
life. Ugh. Ugh. So,
So moving on, we've had our
um,
2.5 minutes of randomness.
so we are talking about the question that I sometimes get: should
Mm.
actors do accents?
Should actors do accents?
Yes. Or do actors have to do accents? Like,
Hmm.
is it part of a great like set of tools that is like, yes, an actor must be, be able to project or make their voice louder or heard in the space. An actor must be able to emote in different things. An actor must be able to get into different characters. Must an actor also have to do accents? That was a very strange way to phrase that. I just thought about that, but
No, I like it. I like it. I think it's yeah, powerful, emotional,
mm,
connected. Sure. But like, I often have this thought about actors being versatile. And when I was a child,
mm-hmm,
I would watch movies with people in the movies, actors in the movies, who
mm-hmm,
were great dancers, great singers, great actors, great movers, great storytellers, great users of language. Um, they did all sorts of extraordinary things
mm-hmm,
and did all of it to an extraordinary standard.
mm-hmm,
And then I always aspired as an actor, and still do, aspired to be able to do as much as possible, be as versatile and um, available to opportunity as possible.
mm-hmm,
And the industry has moved very much in the direction in recent years of it being um, about not necessarily people being actors and being celebrated for their ability to portray a character, but instead having people who are similar or the same as the character type that is being portrayed, and then just using them to do the
mm-hmm.
job that otherwise that an actor would ordinarily or otherwise have done.
Yeah.
Which throws up questions not just for accent, but also for gender, for ethnicity, for sexual orientation,
Mm-hmm.
and all that sort of stuff. There was a big thing in the gay press in the last few weeks about Darren Criss, who
Mm,
said that he's no longer going to play gay characters.
yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, but like, should gay actors play gay characters, or gay actors not play gay characters, or straight actors? Blah, 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 blah. So there's
It's
this whole thing, and it's not that far
it's
away.
it's that big. It's that big. The what was the thing with Bryan Cranston that was in? He played he played a guy who was immobile. So in a movie where he was in a wheelchair for like the entire movie, and there was a big debate that came up that was like, well, there are disabled actors who could play that part, and Bryan Cranston was like, but I am an actor, and part of my job is to be able to play parts that are very, very far away from me rather than give it to someone whose experience is closer to that. Because I guess the question was, where's the challenge in that? But and I feel similarly about accents. When people ask me like, oh, should I be able to do a whole bunch of accent? I mean, my thing is like, get the basics. Be able to do a general something and a general something, whatever that means, and then you can start to add on as you learn more about accents, and as you get better at it, you can add more on. But I get lots of students, particularly younger students, who just have a list of accents that they're like, I need this one, 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 and I need it like next week. I'm just like, that is not that I don't think is feasible, but over periods of time.
That is one of those things, I think. And I find it quite interesting that when you look at the actors who are from Europe who work in America,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
almost invariably use an American accent.
Yeah.
So the very dreamy and wonderfully talented Alexander Skarsgård will absolutely use an American accent. This is a man who speaks like 7 languages or something ridiculous, right? But he uses an American accent of some description in order to portray the characters that he plays. And the same thing with everybody in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
They all have an American accent, except if they're a baddie, because then they speak with an RP accent.
What about no the IT dude who came to life, whose name I can't remember at the moment.
Paul Bettany is the actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's not evil.
No, he's really good actually.
He is.
There's no spoilers in that, guys.
And British accents in American minds equal intelligence, or just supreme evilness. it's either
right? Yeah.
There's nothing in between.
So like I don't know. It's really strange. And then so there's always these actors that go to the States and they're expected to have an American accent. What's hilarious, the Hugh Laurie auditioning, I must have told this story already on the podcast, but Hugh Laurie has told the story on a number of occasions, this anecdote about auditioning for House.
Yeah.
And the producers were looking high and low and looking for this sort of great American actor, and where are all these great American actors? And in comes Hugh Laurie, and he's like, "Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you." And the sort of nice, baritone voice, and he's also, and the director and the producer the producer turned to the director after Hugh Laurie had left the room and said, "Now there's a great American actor." And then he was told when he was on set that he was like, "Oh, I mean, I'm just gonna not playing the character now, so I'll just be me, Hugh Laurie, haha." And then they were kind of going, "But how have you lost your English accent, or how have you lost your American accent now?" And he was like, No, my accent is this. This is how I speak. I'm an actor." And had to really sort of spell it out for people.
Yeah.
That he was acquiring an accent for the role, and it wasn't how he normally speaks. But the hilarity that the producers, whoever they were at the time, had said, "Now that's a great American actor," when he is quite literally not. Like, he's a great actor. He's not American. But like, it's kind of, it's really strange. It's really strange how there really is a double standard with that.
And I didn't know he was British for a long time. I really didn't until later in my life, and then I was really embarrassed. But it was the same thing with Idris Elba. I didn't know that Idris Elba was also from. Is he from Hackney?
He's from Hackney.
Yeah, didn't know that.
And I caught up with all the new Luthers this week. Have you seen Luther, Aundrea Fudge?
Tell me nothing.
You need to get on iPlayer and watch all of Luther, like I've been doing with Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
It's an international trade-off.
I know. I remember when I first saw Luther, like the first time, I was like, "Wow, Idris Elba is a really good accent." I was like, "That's crazy." It was like Americans normally never do British accents well. Like, it's really the hardest thing to get them to be authentically like, And I was like, and he's got all the things. And then I looked it up. I was like, well, gosh darn tootin'. I've been swindled again by Idris.
By those pesky actors and their accent ways.
I remember when Andrew Garfield was in the Amazing Spider-Man? They went through lots of different names. I had
remake of the first movie that everybody remakes every time.
Exactly.
Why are you making the same movie? Anyway.
Yeah. But I didn't know that he was English as well until years later when I saw an interview of him doing something, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that fine." That's fine.
I had literally the opposite situation with him.
Oh, yeah.
where I knew him because I was a first year and he was a third year at drama school. and he used to live with one of my best friends. So then I was like, oh, he's doing a good American. Well done. People will believe that. Like, it was literally the
You're
opposite
like,
of that.
that's believable.
Yeah, for a boy from Surrey. Although he's not actually. He is actually born in America, but
He was, yeah.
he was like raised in the UK. But there are some really good accents out there, and I think it's one of those things. It's like, well, what, especially in the UK. I mean, not especially in the UK, but we're a smaller, more concentrated melting pot of accents in this country because everything's much closer. You know, you can travel across the state and still go, you know, 4 or 5 times the length and breadth of the UK in the States. So it's not like, you know, how many times does the UK fit into Texas? Isn't it like 6 times or something?
It's like 6, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, but we've got such a high concentration of accents in this country that if you can't do another regional accent and you can only do your own, it's called kind of prohibitive. It stops you from being able to play those other characters. And that's not to say that you have to be able to do, you know, I don't know, do a Hull accent to do anything that was ever written by any of the company that's worked with Hull Truck, or that you have to, you know, do Pinter in RP or Shakespeare in a sort of Birmingham accent, although it sounds awesome. But you don't have to do to speak Dylan Thomas poetry in a Welsh accent, although it helps because the rhythm of it really lends itself. But do you know what I mean? There's a kind of, you don't have to do Akeborn in a Scarborough accent, although again it helps. So there's all these sorts of things that we do in this country that from playwrights that don't necessarily work if you don't add an extra layer, especially in this country because accent is so relative to class, or at least the perception of class and the perception of educational standing, that if you can only do your own accent, then you are absolutely pigeonholed into one set of casting possibilities.
Yeah. And I think in the US, I think it's not necessarily class related. I think accent is related to class, but I think I associate it more with like race and ethnicity than like class, and then geographics. So, you know, Northeast versus South versus Midwestern versus like West, right? But that's not necessarily class, it's more geographically related. So I think when people go to drama school in the US, it's more about getting them to the common denominator and then being like, oh, what happens if you go Southern? Because the character needs to be from, you know, somewhere deep South because that's integral to their identity in some way, shape, or form, or the character and who they are. I think that's what my thing with accents are. I'm not really a fan of learning an accent for the sake of an accent, although like, hey, they're fun, so like, why not? But I'm more about what do the sounds of the accent help you with in terms of finding a character, or in terms of finding a particular movement, or finding a particular, you know what I mean? Like it can be so much more than just like, I'm gonna do an accent. So as long as it's helping with the story, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, and the story doesn't necessarily have to be dictated by the writer, but can also be dictated somewhat in negotiation with the actor and the director and stuff. And it can be backstory that's not implicit. Well, it is implicit, but it's not explicit in the narrative. But it can be about, well, this character is, let's use Brooklyn as an example, just because, sure, we always do. Brooklyn and London, that's our kind of go-tos. But if they're from Brooklyn, then you can tell the difference if they are Italian, or if they are African-American, or if they are Jewish, or if they are Irish. So you've got all three of those, plus plus probably also Greek on some level as well, and any of the other sort of European immigrant communities that might live in and around, not necessarily in Brooklyn, but in the sort of greater New York area. But you're going to have those, you'll be able to tell, you specifically will be able to tell much more specifically than I will
Yeah.
necessarily, although I can hear it, but it's not my hometown. So I don't necessarily know it in the same way, but it gives you more information about what what the perspective culture that they come from is, rather than it just being like, oh yeah, they're from Brooklyn, so,
Yeah.
or New York generally. Like,
Yeah.
And the language that people use, I feel like there's a difference between the language that people use and not. And sometimes there can be a real incongruence between the language that somebody uses and the accent with which they use those words and the accents with which they speak. Because sometimes you think, so like Russell Brand is a real example of that. Do you know Russell Brand?
Yeah.
So Russell Brand, British comedian and actor, sort of. And he is extremely clever, extremely well read, but he is brought up in Brentwood, which is in Essex, which is not just, it's sort of northeast of London. It's one of the big towns that you get to just like before you get out into the countryside, basically. And it's a big town, like, it's, you know, lots of people live and work there, and it's fine. And so he speaks in a certain way that historically has indicated a lack of education, or not necessarily a lack of education per se, but more so to do with a lack of social standing. And I feel like often we think about that in a sort of Victorian sense, or a sort of slightly post-Victorian sense of it being like, oh, well, you're not landed gentry and aristocracy, and you're not the sort of fussy middle class, but you are sort of something under that. So you're an everyday bloke in the street, and a guy in the street. And he sort of is, but then when you listen to how he speaks and the things that he's gone through and the things that he's read and his experiences, you understand that actually this is a man of great intelligence, but he doesn't necessarily sound like he fits the stereotype of an educated man in accent terms. So I think he's been quite instrumental in changing things. Not necessarily on a conscious level, but maybe on a subconscious level in the mind of the listener.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that we do have expectations for the way that certain accents sound, but also for the people who represent them. And the amount of time that I've been, I had to learn this. Which is definitely like a cultural thing that I was not very aware of. The amount of quote unquote farmer accents that have been done in my class was just like astonishing, and all the things that come in with that, and other categories of dividing classes, but because it's not just like, okay, these people talk this certain way, it's these people talk this certain way, and this is what that means, and all of that comes in with an accent, which sometimes are positive and then sometimes are not as positive as quite brutally, and it's really, I find it interesting as an American coming in and kind of deconstructing, because I mean, the first year we kind of deconstruct your own accent in order to figure out what accent we can do and what you're closer to and all this other stuff. And it's really interesting to look in and see how much weight an accent holds in lots of people's identity, which is why I think it's a really good tool for actors in terms of character work and discovering things and building a character, because I think within an accent holds so much of a person's identity, but also the way that other people see them as well. And that also contributes to their identity and what they want to show people and what they don't want to show people. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all really fascinating, but I definitely think, but see, the question is then, should actors do accents? And I think they should do accents if it's called for. But then I've also been in rooms where somebody just goes, well, I just want them to be Scottish. Why? Don't know. Just really feel like that's what, that's what it should be. And then you're just like, well, there's no motivation for that. That's just somebody really wanting to show off their Scottish accent, and I don't know if that's necessary.
It's a little bit like sometimes people painting by numbers, but in a sense that people want to do something different, and there's a sort of there's a list of things that you could change, and sometimes when it comes from a director, they kind of they don't want to change the intention behind the moment, behind the scene, the subtext of it. They can't, because that's what's written. They don't want to give somebody a limp, because that seems kind of extreme and extraordinary, and it's like, oh, this person's got one eye. Like, what? How? Why are you doing that? Why are you disabling this character for no reason, or giving them some kind of affliction that that's not in the script? It doesn't make any sense. So sometimes it's like, well, I need there to be something different about them that indicates that they are not from here, or they are not part of, or they are extra or surplus to. And so accent sometimes makes them defined as different, defined as other, and so therefore it becomes a kind of byword for like a primary color of difference. So everyone else is blue and this person is red, and you kind of go, oh, okay. But it's done with such sort of opaqueness. I'm using lots of visual ideas there, but visual metaphors. It's done with such opaqueness that it's just like what they've done is just slapped on a load of color, and you're like, whoa, hold on, I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense anymore. It's just now all just a different color or whatever for no particular reason. And sometimes that can be an overall aesthetic, and you can just accept it from the beginning. You're like, okay, fine. Hamlet is set in Denmark, but we're all doing it in a Liverpudlian accent. Okay. So the castle is now in Liverpool, maybe. I don't know. Like, is it? Sure, whatever. But it's like, but you can sort of get on board with that in the beginning. But if somebody just turns up with some random accent because they're a messenger, and it's like, my lord, I come with a message, my lord. And it's like, okay, so why is there some random Welsh guy? And then there's, the next time it's like, I bring news from over there. You're like, what? Who are you? And why have you just turned up? It just doesn't make any sense to just arbitrarily do that. And then sometimes it's not done with enough nuance and care, and the considerations that it does. It is an extraordinarily potent marker of somebody's cultural and socio-political standpoint and upbringing, etc., that it's kind of a bit like, making somebody blind when they're not, or just putting a hat on someone for no reason. It's just like, what? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I get a lot of really. I've got a lot of first years who came in and they're like, well, I want to be an actor, but I basically just want to do a whole bunch of accents. And I was like, so is that why you wanted to become an actor? I was like, because you could just start a YouTube channel with you doing a whole bunch of accents, a lot less money than going through acting school and doing that. There is this kind of expectation that, like, I'm going to be an actor, I'm going to have to do a lot of accents, and I'm going to have to do them well. And there's a sad reality that some people can do accents really, really well, and others are not as great at getting them. So that's just what I mean. Sometimes you're good at some things, you're not great at other things. Is it the end? I don't think it's the end all of end all if you can't. I mean, there's some great actors who don't do accents.
Michael Caine, never done an accent in his life. I mean, he will tell you he's doing an American accent.
No,
darling,
no, it's just a different set. Different location. I think it's Ian McKellen who also he says he doesn't do accents.
Who?
Was it Ian McKellen when he was he was in an interview and he was basically just like, well, I don't do them because I can't.
Yeah, he's not, he
Yeah.
doesn't really do accents. He does his own. He does his sort of own accent. Mm.
Mm.
So he has an interesting accent because he was born and raised in, or just near Manchester,
Which you would never know.
which you would never really know, except
Yeah.
when you really listen and you're like, oh yeah.
Just a
But
glimmer of
then
it.
he then went to Oxford,
Mm.
um, around about the same sort of time as Maggie Smith.
Mm.
The two of them were at Oxford at a similar time, and so he changed the way that he spoke because he went to Oxford, which
Mm-hmm.
is not unusual. And as we know, RP sometimes is also often referred to as Oxford English.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of Oxford English sound mixed with his Manchester sound is basically what you get with Ian McKellen.
Mm.
And for him also it is about his quality of speech. So the
Mm.
quality of voice, but also the quality of the language that he uses, and he's an extremely
Wow.
bright man. So
Oh yeah.
all of these things combined, you get this kind of sense of gravitas and authenticity and authority and intellect that you don't necessarily get with everybody else.
Mm.
Similarly to Maggie Smith, she doesn't really do accents,
Yeah.
but
She did one in the
she
Yaya
kind of,
season.
yeah, sparingly. Harry Potter, she does a Scottish. She does a kind
Yes.
of Edinburgh kind of accent.
Yeah.
And then
Soft Edinburgh.
in Grand Exotic Marigold Hotel, can't say the name
Yeah.
of the movie, it's a great film.
It
She
is
does
great.
a sort of East End London sound.
Yeah.
Then her parents were Scottish,
Mm.
as far as I'm aware, and she was born in the East End of London, not
Mm.
far from where I live, in fact. Um,
Really?
yeah, she's local. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think if you're a good actor, you're a good actor.
Yeah.
And often, as we know, and we know several of them,
Mm.
if you need somebody to really coach you on a specific accent,
Yeah.
there will be somebody called in to help you.
Mm.
Um,
It could be me.
it could be you or me
I think
or any number of other people. Sadly, it's quite a niche
yeah,
industry.
there's
And
quite a
and
few
if you
there.
want to listen to somebody doing some extraordinary accents,
Mm.
and having been coached by somebody who is also extraordinary and coaches in several different languages,
Mm.
watch Killing Eve
Oh yeah.
and watch Jodie Comer absolutely knock it out of the park with
Yeah.
scores of accents and
She's like
languages.
Russian, Italian, RP.
Yeah,
Uh, she doing American. I feel like she was
yeah,
American at
I
some.
think so. When she
And
just drops, and she speaks French in it,
yes, she just is French. Yeah.
and like when she just drops into RP having done all of these other accents,
Mm.
my jaw just was like, "Huh?" Like I just was sitting there with my mouth open because I was thinking, where on earth is she? Because I hadn't seen some of the stuff that she'd been in before. So when I saw her in Killing Eve, I was absolutely astonished by the work that she'd done, and it is absolutely brilliant. It's
Yeah.
brilliant, and I can't wait for the new season, which comes out later this year. They
Does it?
finished filming. It's in post production. I don't stalk people who are in this show.
Why do you know that? Why do you know that?
Whatever. Sean Delaney put it on his Instagram. It's fine.
Yeah, no, just cash, super cash.
He's
Something I know.
currently in New York doing. I don't know why we're talking about Sean Delaney, but he's currently in New York doing the Broadway transfer of The Ferryman,
Yeah.
which a friend of mine, Terry, is also in. So sure. Anywho, Andrew, what did you realise now that I've stopped talking about Sean Delaney?
That now I can't stop thinking about Sean.
He is lovely. He's lovely.
um, and oh gosh, I've thought about so many things. My question has always been, should actors do accents? And I don't know if they should, but I think if they can, they should. That's I think.
So are you saying Do accents, but only if you're not terrible.
Terrible. And if you are terrible, maybe you should get an accent coach, and maybe you should get one before, like 3 days before you start shooting.
Oh my God, can we put that in there as a massive just caveat to all accent work? All accent work.
Not enough time, and I would even say a week is not enough time. You need months to do an accent.
A month is the shortest amount of time you can really do it. Like, let's be really honest about it. If you're going to play a character, you need to have been using that accent for a month. You can't just do it 2 days before, unless it is something that you are so familiar with that you can just drop into.
Yeah.
I can just about drop into a German American accent at the drop of a hat if I need to. And I can drop into RP at the drop of a hat if I need to. Those are pretty much the two that I could just do off the bat. There are 25, 30 that I could do given a couple of weeks practice.
Yeah.
But if it's a new one, it's going to take me a month.
Oh, yeah. It takes me a month every time I have to go and teach a new one that I've moved on for. I'm like, right, okay. So I'm just going to sit here and listen to all of the Welsh always gets me. So it's like, gonna have to listen to that at least 97,000 times. But yes, no, you need significant amounts of time. You can't employ that enough. It's not something that people get overnight. Leon.
Yeah.
What have you realized in this episode?
I've realised that I absolutely categorically think that accents are important, that actors should do accents, and that if an actor could do an accent, then that doesn't mean that they should. So it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you can, you should, but that if it is required by the character, by the plot, and there's some kind of justification for it, by all means, go for gold, enjoy yourself. But it shouldn't just be one of those things that you sort of slap on at the last minute and think, oh yeah, I'll just do that, I'll be fine. Because it doesn't work like that. It doesn't, there's a whole, like neurolinguistic thing that has to go on with muscles and how do you say a word and stress patterns and prosody, and there's so much to it that is not just, it is a layer, but it's not an external layer. It's a really kind of embedded layer. It's so you can't just just chuck it on at the last minute. It needs some thought. It needs some guidance, some gentle coaxing.
And at the very least, you need enough time to do it wrong before you do it right. I don't think there's anything that you learn where you start doing it right away. You got to do it wrong a couple of times before you do it right.
Yeah, no, there's nothing. I can't think of anything.
I was gonna be like eating, but I was like, even when I was learning to eat,
what?
I still can't eat.
No, you got that one over your face, aren't you, Fudge? I don't think there's anything. Like, there's nothing. Okay, breathing. You didn't learn to breathe, but yeah.
No, but even then, when you first breathe and you cry, it's because it's not like, oh no, am I doing it right? And then, well, yeah, I am.
Well, I'm not sure that babies have anxiety about whether they're breathing right or not, but they probably. I think they're just cold. Generally, I think they're like, oh, why is it so cold?
But when you go underwater, right? Don't you have to learn like how? Because that's a really big thing for a lot of I don't know. My sister teaches swimming, so like for little ones. One of the big things is like, oh no, I can't breathe the same way I breathe above. So I need to figure out how long I can hold my breath for. Can I open my mouth? Will that be okay? Oh, this water just came in. So maybe it is. Maybe you do.
I think breathing underwater becomes a thing. Like once you start breathing, there ain't no turning back. Let's be honest.
You can't turn it off.
And then when you go underwater, it's like, oh, I can't breathe anymore. And that gives lots of people a panic attack,
It does, yeah.
My mum can't do it. She like puts her face in the water and then she's like, oh, okay, I'm done. Can't do it anymore. You're like, all right, chill out. It's only water. So I think, there's differences of
Different degrees.
different degrees of that. But I don't think there's, no, you're right. There is nothing that you do that you just get immediately. You have to work towards it in some way.
Yeah. So work towards your accent.
Oh. Should actors work towards their accents? Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to contact us about anything we said in the podcast, you can reach us on Twitter at CanYouHearPod.
Or on Instagram at Can You Hear Me Podcast.
Or you can search for us on Facebook and on YouTube.
Or email us at canyouhearmeattheback@gmail.com.
You can find me, Leon, on Twitter at Leon Trayman.
Or me, Aundrea, at Aundrea Fudge on Twitter.
Please support the podcast by subscribing as a patron on our Patreon site.
The link is in the show notes.
To keep the podcast advertisement free, as well as get access to cool extra stuff, discounts, bonus episodes, as well as supporting ongoing voice research funding as well. Okay, love you, bye!